Hello, everyone. Let's talk about literacy narratives and their genre conventions. To facilitate this conversation, we are going to analyze an essay that you've already read, Superman and Me by Sherman Alexie. Let's get into it. First, let's think about the thesis of this essay. Normally, it's pretty easy to identify a thesis in an argumentative essay, but this essay is a little different. Since it is a narrative, Alexie isn't going to write a sentence in the first paragraph that says, "In this literacy narrative, I'm going to argue blah blah." Instead, we have to use our critical reading skills. We have to read the essay holistically and think about the larger point that Alexie is trying to make. When we read through the whole essay, a few distinct themes emerge. First, Alexie's literacy journey was influenced by the example of his father, who was an avid reader. Alexie began reading, in this case, comic books, in imitation of his father. Second, once Alexie learned to read, this dramatically affected his outlook of the world. He provides a vivid description of how he began to order his world in terms of paragraphs and essays. Third, the literacy practices we traditionally associate with school were not valued within Alexie's community when he was a kid. Alexie does acknowledge that though his peers were experts in certain cultural literacy practices like performing powwow songs and telling stories, they had little interest or motivation in school reading or writing. And finally, Alexie concludes the essay by becoming the model of school literacy practices that he never had as a child. If we were to synthesize these 4 points into a general thesis, it might look similar to this quotation from the story. In all my years in the reservation school system, I was never taught how to write poetry, short stories, or novels. I was certainly never taught that Indians write poetry, short stories, and novels. Writing was something beyond Indians. Got it highlighted. As we can see, once we recognize this is the thesis, we can see how every story Alexie shares ties back to his general point that the economic and cultural conditions of the reservation did not support the development of literacy practices that are valued outside of the reservation. Though he shares a number of different stories, including his first memories of texts, his first reading experience, his time in school as a child, and his current role as a teacher, Alexie always ties these stories back to his main thesis. They become the evidence for his argument. Let's look specifically at Alexie's short description of his classroom on the reservation on pages 325 and 326 in your textbook. You can use this as a model when you write your own literacy narrative. First, he begins with a topic sentence that previews what the paragraph will be about. After reading the sentence, we know that this paragraph will be about how Alexie's peers and teachers responded to his love of reading. Then, he situates the story in a specific time and place. We know he is a child in a reservation classroom. Next, he details the action. He fought with his fellow students because he participated in the classroom literacy practices that were rejected by his peers. He continues by reflecting critically on the literacy practices of the classroom. He notes that the students resisted literacy practices in the classroom because they were expected to fail even though they were clearly intelligent in ways not explicitly valued in the classroom. And finally, he concludes the paragraph by connecting his reflection on literacy practices to the larger problem that serves as the thesis of his essay. His peers were expected to fail, and this created a culture on the reservation where failure became the norm. So, as you write your own literacy narrative, let's keep this model in mind. Remember to craft a thesis, tell a descriptive story or stories related to literacy practices, and connect these practices back to your thesis. Good luck.